Hey campers, the other day we were trying to do something simple. We just wanted to measure something, a voltage, on a variable BEC voltage regulator, whatever you want to call them, okay? And it was difficult because the voltmeter I was using, I probably had that for like 20 years, okay? I don't like buying new things all the time because it was perfectly fine. It was just annoying. But most of the tasks I have around the house, if I'm checking the voltage in a outlet, boom, done, 30 seconds. I never paid attention to how quickly it shut off. Anyway, I looked into a new voltmeter. I was going to go up to Lowe's, I was going to go up to Home Depot or Ace or wherever and see what they had up on the shelf. I'm like, I don't feel like going all the way up there. I feel like not going there and checking out what's available and watching some YouTube reviews and asking myself, what is the purpose of the voltmeter that you want to use here in the house? And I was thinking it should be a desktop kind of voltmeter. And one with probes that aren't that big around. Okay? So, in the video where I was working on this project, I'm still working on this project, I had to wait for some new voltage regulators to come in the mail. In that time, I've ordered a new voltmeter. This guy right here. And it's got a display old farts like me can see. And it's got a little kickstand in the back so I can set it down and either show you what I'm doing or see it myself and adjust it for the glare of the overhead lights. And it's got smaller probes. That way when you're checking a small flight controller or something like that, the probes aren't so big that you're touching two contacts and short something out. Don't ask me how I know. I've done that and I felt dumb. But we got a new voltmeter. I'm going to show it to you and then we're going to continue on and I'm going to show you some voltage regulators that I prefer. All right, but first, the voltmeter. So if you were to go to the store, big box store, Walmart and Ace Hardware, they have voltmeters for 30, 40 bucks. And then they have like the good Flukes and the other brand, I forget what it is. But they're usually starting at $100 or even more than $100. The last time I bought a voltmeter out on the road because I borrowed mine to another coach driver, it didn't come back to me. So that's kind of frustrating, okay? As I was going through the YouTube videos and trying to decide what I felt like spending for something that I use frequently, but not to the point where I'm building computer towers and stuff like that. I'm not doing anything that fancy. This is 40 bucks. All right. It's automatic. You don't even have to press any buttons. But the one feature I will defeat is to turn off the freaking auto off thing. That drives me bonkers. So one of the things I like about this not very expensive voltmeter are the size of the probes. They're pretty small, which means you can work on smaller electronics like us hobbyists usually have floating around. So I've made sure that this is not plugged into any power. But one of the problems I was running in about a month ago, I was working on something with my big old Fluke, and I had the giant probes on the end, and it was my fault because I didn't disconnect the power before I was trying to do something, whatever measurement, and they were so wide that when I went to touch something, it made contact with a chip or some sort of whatever, and I shorted the whole thing out and sparks and smoke and it was done. But these, as you can see, if I want to, I can go in here and I can test the legs on a microchip. They're that small. And I highly recommend that you keep these little covers, because you don't want to get poked by these, man. Those are sharp looking. All right, so yeah, you can use this to test stuff on surface mount boards. All right, of course you'd be doing it more of an up and down thing, not sideways, but extremely useful. Okay, so let me show you how quickly this auto function works. What I have for you set up right here is just a square battery. It's 9 volts. It's been around my desk for about a year, and you can measure it both ways, but let's do it the right way. We're going to do positive and negative, and watch the meter, how quickly it measures. Okay, here we go. Boom. That's pretty quick. All right, let's do it again. It's reset. Boom. That's pretty cool. We have a 5-volt battery, 4.8 volts. This was a battery I've had for about 20 years. No, yeah. Receiver packs. You remember, like on nitro airplanes, you had to have a receiver pack? Or if you had a gas airplane, you had to have an ignition pack that was separate from the receiver pack. Anyway, that's what this is. You can use it for many things. But let's test this out. Okay, we have a piece of double-sided tape holding that in place. We're going to do negative. Boom. It's fully charged, 5.2 volts. All right. Let's do one more battery on the auto measure thing. Because in reality, this is all I'm going to use it for, is checking voltage, make sure I don't blow stuff up, but I still do, because it's a hobby and whatever. So here we go, negative, positive, 4.8 volts. This one's at nominal voltage, but it's almost dead. So that makes sense, because it's the one we've been using the most lately. All right. One of the other nicer features of this voltmeter is that gives you a measuring graph. I don't know how to use it, but I'm going to poke stuff and see what happens. So let's see what it does. It's measuring the voltage over time. I think it goes back about 30 seconds, if I'm not mistaken. And it's pretty cool if you're trying to track something. I don't think you can recall it, and I don't believe it's saved to an SD card. But just the fact that you can watch the voltage go up and down if you're measuring like a motor or something, man, that's pretty cool. So if you like your workshop to be nice and quiet, I mean, this is the place in my house where I get the most peace and quiet. And I hate beeps when I'm trying to concentrate on something. But that's just me. Some guys like things that beep all day. I'm not that guy. All right. So it doesn't really make a lot of beeps like the Fluke. The Fluke was freaking annoying. It would beep when you turned it on. It would beep every time you made a selection for the functions. It would beep a few seconds before it turned off. It'd beep when it turned off. That particular model, that wasn't defeatable. Didn't matter what combination of buttons or whatever. I could not get it to be defeated. The auto off function, I couldn't turn that one off either. And it turned off after 3 minutes. I didn't like that. So here, this one's easy. All right, we're in auto mode. Press and hold the menu. Look at that. It comes right up. And then you go down here, system settings. Boom. Then you go over here. And then you can change your theme. All right. If you keep going down, you can change it from Celsius to Fahrenheit for us Americans that don't like the metric system. Then we go here to, oh my God, it's the auto off function. So you have a selection between off, 5 minutes, 15, and 20. And we're never going to use any of these because we don't forget to turn things off. All right, so I kind of haven't figured out how to get out of this stuff. I think you just hold it here and it goes back to the main menu. Something like that. There you go. Go all the way back up to the top, hold the auto button, and now you're back at the beginning, okay? I don't get paid to do this stuff. I just want to show you something that I found that's very useful when you're trying to do our silly little electronics projects on our workbench. Very useful thing. One of the other favorite things here is it's got a kickstand. So you can freaking look at it instead of going, hey dude, I can't see nothing. So that's a nice touch. All right, let's go check out some voltage regulators. All right, so what I'm going to show you now are two of the voltage regulators that I enjoy. They're both variable. This one has, what do you call it? I want to call it a rheostat, but it's a variable resistance thing up here at the top. Or you could solder pads back here, which I always burn them off because I'm dumb or whatever. But you can solder the pads and have it at a fixed voltage, okay? It's automatically variable, or you can fix the voltage back here on the back. All right. This can go up to 6S and put out as little as 1.5 volts, I believe. I think that's the same for both of these. This is a different kind of buck voltage regulator. Okay. This one isn't as directional. And you can use a trigger to turn this on and off if you fell for it. That's what the extra hole is for. Otherwise, it's a positive, negative, negative, positive, or something like that. Yeah, there it is. You need to know about this buck thing, this buck voltage regulator, okay? Aside from it being directional, is when you first get it, you have to take your little jeweler's screwdriver and you have to turn that screw at least 10 times before you see anything changing on your voltmeter, okay? And you use like the smallest little screwdriver that you can find. Turn that little brass screw right there. We've soldered ourselves up a little battery connector, and we got the positive on the positive side, right? Negative on the negative side. So I am going to show you, I'm going to hook up a battery, then I'm going to put a voltmeter on the output side and show you what happens when you turn this screw. Okay? All right, let's hook up a battery. All right, let's see. I think it's counterclockwise. You have to turn this screw. They say 10 times, but I think it's less than that. Or it might be more than that. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Counterclockwise, about 10 times. So I like to set my voltages here. Look how accurate that meter is. It's got 3 decimal points. So let's say you wanted to set it to 9 volts. You can put it right at 9 volts. It's got little tiny changes. Little tiny changes. That's pretty close. So I think this particular voltage regulator is 2 or 3 amps. Don't quote me on that, but I enjoy using that because of its ease of use, and you don't have to solder any little pads, which I usually burn off and then end up throwing the voltage regulator out because it's annoying and I don't do very well with those kind of voltage regulators. So I recommend this is one of the 2 that I enjoy using. All right, let's go on to this one. I'm going to solder the battery terminals, whoopsie, onto this guy. Okay, so we have our battery soldered on to the bottom. Okay, our battery connector soldered on to the bottom. And I did it on the bottom because it's only temporary. They're the wrong gauge wires for this situation, but it's just for demonstration purposes. And we're going to be using the probes up here. So I want to keep everything separate so we don't see sparks and fucking bullshit happening. I don't remember if these have a light. I think they have a light on them. Indicator light. Let's see. No, there's no sparks. No LEDs. Definitely in negative and positive. We hooked it up right. So that's not an issue. Alright. So let's move forth. Put that on a double-sided tape. That's our favorite way of putting things together here. And then we are still in auto mode with our voltmeter. Then on this particular voltage regulator, the negative is in the middle, the positive is on the outside. So we will very carefully hold these into the conductors there, the pads. I'm going to show you what happens when you turn this variable potentiometer, I think it is. Ooh, there it is. Whatever's going in is coming out. That's full right. And if we turn it counterclockwise, going down. Let's put it at 9 volts. Close to it. There we go. 9.1. Perfect. Well, it's a little bit... I think that's pretty close. The other one seemed to have a bit more finer control when it came to adjusting the output voltage. But there you are. Those are my two favorite voltage regulators. And my new favorite voltage meter, where you can defeat things. You can go in the menu and turn stuff off or turn stuff on, or put a graph on there that shows you measurements over time. It's pretty cool. If you have listened to my banter this far, all 5 people on the planet that watch this, I don't get paid to do any of this stuff. I do these little things because maybe it'll help you. And from what I see on Facebook, the questions that I see asked on Army, or whatever it's called, FNIRSI Army, I think is the Facebook page, and a lot of the Walk Snail Facebook groups, there is some soldering that has to be done when you're working with flight controllers, and they're not. Some of the people that have problems are not putting the Moonlight or whatever VTX, they're not running the power to the correct output on the flight controllers, and then they have a brownout when they start flying because the motors are sucking all the power away from the VTX as it's climbing. Then they lose their camera and they say, well, it's the VTX. No, it's not. You have it hooked up wrong. So if you get yourself a voltmeter like this one, and it's got these little tiny probes on it, these are small enough so that when you have your flight controller hooked up to a battery and immobilized on your desk, hopefully, I prefer to use double-sided tape so it doesn't move around, you can measure which pads on the flight controller are the appropriate pads to use for connecting your VTX or your, what else has to be connected? Your GPS antenna or whatever, beepers. You need to know which pads on the flight controller are used and what voltages are coming out, because some of the flight controllers are not labeled, and then when you go to compare it to the diagrams online, they're not always accurate. So having a voltage meter of some kind, preferably one with little probes. It doesn't have to be this one. This was $37. $37. That's not a lot of money. And look what it does. Do I expect it to last me forever? No. Do I want to pay over $100 or $200 for a Fluke or whatever brand is out there at the Home Depot? No, because this does the same thing. And as I'm thinking about it right now, when I'm out on the road driving an entertainer bus, a lot of the problems that we have with the buses are electronic. And we're always having to chase after fuses. If you ever look at a tour bus, the door that's right by where the driver sits, the bottom part of that opens up and there's 100 different fuses and breakers and relays. And this kind of voltage meter would be more appropriate for checking for faults in that stuff than those big old stupid Flukes from the hardware store. And it's a lot cheaper. Old eyeballs can read this without glasses. That's my argument. And then there's always going to be a tour where you're out there with 9 or 12 buses just for one band, and then you're on a bigger tour that has, carriers from carrying another band, and there's 3 bands, and now you have sometimes 20 buses. There's always going to be that one guy that shows up to Nashville with no freaking tools. And you'll be out there, and of course, he's the new guy, so he's probably got the crappiest bus in the fleet, but he's working. He has no tools. And then it's going to be 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're leaving the venue. Hey, Mr. Eddie, I don't understand why none of my lights are flashing for my trailer. You got a voltage meter? And there you go. And then all of a sudden, that band is on a different tour next week, and you don't see your voltage meter anymore. That's what happens. I've gone through 3 voltage meters like that because people forget. We have Amazon now. You can have shit sent to your fucking hotel room. Stop borrowing stuff. I'm just not borrowing stuff anymore. It's simple as that, because it never comes back. There's probably 2 or 3 people that I would borrow stuff to, but many of them, they borrow stuff and it never comes back. So I recommend this to other coach drivers or people that do electronics at home. It's pretty cool. Those voltage regulators are also very, very handy if you're not very good at soldering small things like those pads. All right, let's disconnect that before we go shorten shit out. Okay. These pads on the back, okay? They're tiny. Look how tiny they are. Look how tiny they are. They're really tiny. Okay? If you use the wrong amount of heat, those pads they'll just melt right off. And then you won't be able to use that fixed voltage that you're after, and you'll have to use the potentiometer to adjust your voltage. So I'm glad that on this particular one, you have a variable resistance kind of situation there. I don't know if it's going to stay there, but I haven't had any issues with the voltage going up and down to the point where it shorts things out. I have had problems where I put the wrong voltage in and I cook fans. So that's where we are. Thank you for listening to me banter. Have a nice day. Bye. Yeah, I'll remember to turn it off.